Well, howdy, folks. Now, I got a question for you. What do you get when you cross a teenage troublemaker, a ship's steering wheel, and enough American grit to choke a horse? You get the man who literally put repeating firepower in the hands of every cowboy, lawman, and soldier from here to Kingdom Come. His name was Samuel Colt. This Connecticut Yankee didn't just make guns, this sucker made history. Samuel Colt was born in Hartford in 1814, and right from the get-go, this kid was different. His mother died when he was just 7 years old, and his father was struggling to keep the family textile business afloat. Young Sam wasn't exactly what you'd call a model student. He's more interested in taking things apart than putting them back together. He had a particular fascination with explosives that would make a modern ATF agent break out in a cold sweat. Now, by age 16, Sam's father had had enough of his son's pyrotechnic experiments and shipped him off to sea aboard the brig Corvo, bound for India. Now, most parents today ground their kids for playing with firecrackers, but Sam's dad put him on a boat to the other side of the world. It's what I call old school parenting. Here's where the magic happened. During those long months at sea, young Colt spent hours watching the ship's wheel. Every time the helmsman turned that wheel, it would click into place with a satisfying mechanical precision. The wheel could turn, lock, turn again, lock again, over and over, smooth as butter. And that's when lightning struck. Colt realized he could apply that same rotating locking mechanism to firearms. Instead of one shot and reload, what if you could have 5 or 6 shots ready to go? What if the act of cocking the hammer automatically rotated the cylinder to the next chamber? When Colt returned to America in 1831, he had more than just sea legs and sailor stories. He had carved wooden models of what would become the world's first practical revolver. But turning a teenager's wooden toy into a working firearm, that was going to take some serious American ingenuity and a whole lot of cash. Colt did what any enterprising young American would do. He became a traveling showman. From 1832 to 36, he toured the country as Dr. Colt, demonstrating the effects of nitrous oxide, laughing gas, to paying audiences. Talk about making it in America, a young Sam Colt wearing a top hat and a fancy coat, getting folks high on laughing gas while secretly using the profits to fund his gun-making dreams. That right there is entrepreneurship, folks. I could cry. Now, the money from his laughing gas shows allowed him to hire gunsmith John Pearson in Baltimore to create the first working prototypes. And let me tell you, Pearson earned every penny. These weren't just guns, they were precision instruments that required tolerances tighter than a tick on a hound dog. In 1836, with his patent finally in hand, Colt opened the Patent Arms Manufacturing Company in Paterson, New Jersey. He was 23 years old and about to introduce America to the first commercially produced revolver, Colt Paterson. Paterson was a 28 caliber 5-shot revolver that weighed about 2.5 pounds. It featured Colt's revolutionary rotating cylinder mechanism where cocking the hammer automatically advanced the cylinder to the next chamber. For the first time in history, a shooter could fire 5 shots just as fast as they could pull the trigger. But here's the thing about being revolutionary. Sometimes the world, they just ain't ready for your revolution. Paterson had some serious teething problems, we'll call it. It was complicated to load, prone to jamming when fouled with black powder residue, and frankly, it looked more like a scientific instrument than a fighting tool. The U.S. military took one look at it, declared it unreliable, and went back to their single-shot muskets. Sales were slower than molasses in January, and by 1842, Colt's company went bankrupt. The man who would become America's first gun tycoon was flat broke. He was watching his revolutionary invention get sold off at auctions for scrap prices. Now, most folks would have thrown in the towel right there, but Sam Colt wasn't most folks. While he was licking his wounds and trying to figure out his next move, something incredible was happening 2,000 miles away in Texas. Captain Samuel Walker of the Texas Rangers had gotten his hands on some of those failed Paterson revolvers, and he was putting them to work against Comanche warriors on the frontier. See, the Rangers had a problem. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing enemies who could put 20 arrows in the air in the time it took to reload a single-shot rifle. But with Colt's revolvers, that's a game changer. A Ranger with 5-shot Paterson could match the firepower of a Comanche warrior's bow and do it with more stopping power and accuracy. These guns weren't failing on the frontier. They were saving lives and winning battles. In 1846, Walker wrote Colt the letter that would change everything. Pistols which you have made have been in use by the Texas Rangers for 3 years and are the only good improvement I have ever seen. Without your pistols, we should not have the confidence to undertake such daring adventures. Now, Walker didn't just want to buy more Pattersons, he wanted Colt to make them bigger, badder, and more powerful. The result was the Walker Colt. Folks, this thing was an absolute unit. The Walker was a .44 caliber monster that weighed 4 pounds 9 ounces. That's heavier than most rifles today. It packed 60 grains of black powder behind a .44 caliber ball, giving it enough power to drop a horse at 100 yards. But man, folks, this wasn't just a sidearm, it was a hand cannon that could punch through body armor and still have enough energy left to ruin someone's whole day. The U.S. government ordered 1,000 Walker Colts for the Mexican-American War, and suddenly Sam Colt was back in business. But there was just one problem: he didn't have a factory anymore. Everything had been sold off during the bankruptcy. So Colt did what any smart businessman would do. He subcontracted the work to Eli Whitney Jr.'s armory in Connecticut. Whitney had the machinery, the skilled workers, and the production capacity. Colt had the design and the government contract, and, well, it was a match made in manufacturing heaven. The Walker Colt proved the concept, but it was the 1851 Navy that perfected it. This .36 caliber revolver was everything the Patterson should have been: reliable, accurate, and elegant. Weighing in at 2 pounds 10 ounces, it was light enough for cavalry, but powerful enough to stop a man in his tracks. The 1851 Navy featured an octagonal barrel, a brass trigger guard, and Colt's signature cylinder scene depicting a naval battle between Texas and Mexican ships. But most importantly, it worked every time. The tolerances were tight, the action was smooth, and the reliability was downright legendary. This was a gun that really put Colt on the map. Wild Bill Hickok carried a pair of 1851 Navies. So did Confederate General Robert E. Lee. When you needed a gun that would fire when you pulled the trigger, you reached for a Colt. But if we're talking about revolutionary firearms, we can't skip the crown jewel of Colt's empire: the single-action army, better known as the Peacemaker. Introduced in 1873, this .45 caliber Colt revolver became the most iconic handgun in American history. The SAA was chambered in .45 Colt, a cartridge that pushed the 255 grain bullet at about 900 feet per second. Now, it wasn't the fastest or the flattest shooting around, but it had something more important: it had stopping power. When you hit someone with a .45 Colt, they stayed down. The revolver itself was a masterpiece of the 19th century engineering, at the time. It featured a solid frame, a 7.5-inch barrel, and a 6-shot cylinder. The action was smooth as silk, the balance was perfect, and the reliability was unquestioned. This was a gun that armed the cavalry, the lawmen, and the outlaws of the American West. But here's what most folks don't realize: Colt didn't just revolutionize firearms, he revolutionized manufacturing itself. His Hartford Armory was one of the first factories in the world to use truly interchangeable parts in assembly line production. Before Colt, guns were made by individual craftsmen who hand-fitted every component. If a part broke, you needed a gunsmith to make a replacement. But Colt's system meant that any part from any gun would fit any other gun of the same model. Break a hammer spring in your Peacemaker? Any Colt dealer could sell you a replacement that would drop right in. This wasn't just revolutionary for guns, it was revolutionary for all manufacturing. The techniques Colt developed in his armory would later be applied to everything from sewing machines to automobiles. Henry Ford didn't invent the assembly line, he just perfected what Sam Colt had started decades earlier. But by the 1850s, Colt wasn't just making guns, he was building an empire. His Hartford Armory employed over 1,400 workers and could produce 150 finished revolvers per day. He was selling guns to both sides of conflicts around the world, from the Crimean War to the American Civil War. Colt understood something that many manufacturers today still struggle with: branding matters. He created the rampant coil trademark, one of the first corporate logos in American history. He gave away thousands of presentation-grade revolvers to military officers, politicians, and celebrities alike. So he understood that if you wanted to sell guns to everyone, you needed everyone to know your name. When Samuel Colt died in 1862 at the age of 47, he fundamentally had changed the world. His revolvers had armed the Texas Rangers, won the Mexican-American War, and were about to play a crucial role in the Civil War as well. But more than that, his manufacturing techniques had laid groundwork for America's Industrial Revolution. Every modern pistol, from your Glock to your 1911, owes its existence and principles to Samuel Colt and what he established. Just the idea that you should be able to fire multiple shots without reloading, parts should be interchangeable, the manufacturing should be precise and repeatable. These weren't just good ideas, they were revolutionary concepts that changed everything. From the first Patterson revolver to the legendary Peacemaker, Colt's firearms didn't just arm America, they defined it. Every time you see a cowboy movie, every time you hear about the Wild West, every time someone talks about American manufacturing excellence, you're seeing the legacy of Samuel Colt. The man who started as a teenage pyromaniac ended up as America's first industrial tycoon, and his revolvers became the tools that built the American West. That ain't bad for a kid who got kicked out of school for playing with explosives. Now, if you enjoyed learning about America's greatest gunmaker, hit that like button harder than a 45 Colt hitting a tin can. Subscribe for more deep dives into firearms that shaped our history, and drop a comment below. I want to hear about your favorite Colt revolver, or any Samuel Colt stories you might know. And speaking of revolutionary firearms, you might want to check out this video right here about the guns that actually won the American West. Trust me, after learning about Sam Colt's genius, you're going to want to see how his creations performed when the chips were down and the lead was flying. Until next time, keep your powder dry, your groups tight, and remember, they don't make them like Samuel Colt anymore, and that's exactly why his legacy lives on. Y'all come back now, you hear?